The sound of concrete cracking wasn't supposed to be part of my morning. But there I was, standing in ankle-deep water, watching Karen from the HOA scream into her phone while her prized garden statue tilted sideways like the Titanic. Her foundation had split. Again. Her front porch sagged. Again. And right behind her, the cul-de-sac bubbled with runoff like a busted soda can. She locked eyes with me across the flood and pointed, like this was my fault. I just raised my coffee and waved. What she didn't know was, I had the paperwork. I had the photos. I had the goddamn drone footage. And I had waited long enough. Yep. That's me. Probably wondering how we got here. Let's rewind to the first time Karen showed up at my door with a clipboard, a fake smile, and a plan to bury my creek in concrete. But before we dive into this wild story of concrete crimes, HOA power trips, and how I used a swamp to bring down an empire, tap that like button to support this channel. Subscribe if you want more true tales of HOA chaos. We've got new ones every week. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Always fun to see which city folks are tuning in from. Now let's go back to where it all started. Before the HOA tried to kill my creek, my backyard in Alder Bend was the quiet kind of place. Not silent, just peaceful. I'd finish a shift under someone's leaky kitchen sink, grab a beer, and sit by the edge of the stream that curled through my yard like a lazy ribbon. I never caught a fish in it, but that wasn't the point. There was something about the reeds, the dragonflies, the way the air smelled like cut grass and damp stones. It was mine. I didn't need a fence. I didn't need a rule book. I just needed that water. But then came the line redraw. See, Alder Bend was split. Our side was older. Original builds from the 80s, hand-built decks, real trees. The other side? Fresh beige nightmares, where every mailbox looked like it came from the same mold. That's where the HOA lived, and loved to rule. For a while they left us alone. But one meeting at City Council, one vote nobody warned us about, and boom, our street was suddenly under their care. That's when Karen Worthington showed up. It was a Saturday. Hot, wet air like the sky was sweating. I had just sat down when I heard a knock. There she was, tennis visor, clipboard clutched like a weapon, pastel outfit straight out of a catalog for people who own too many salad spinners. Hi there. I'm Karen, I'm the Community Standards Chair for the HOA. Just stopping by to chat about your property. I blinked. You mean my creek? She laughed, but it was the kind of laugh people use before delivering bad news. Well, yes, that water feature is actually non-compliant with our community guidelines. Water feature? I asked. Lady, that's a creek. It's older than all these houses. Still, it's a safety concern. It attracts mosquitoes, it's uncontained, and honestly, it doesn't match the aesthetic standards. I stared at her like she'd accused my yard of organized crime. The deed says it's a protected drainage path. County mapped and everything. Karen didn't care. She scribbled something on her clipboard like she was logging a criminal. Then she left. Her perfume hung in the air long after she did, expensive and aggressive. 2 days later, a blue notice was taped to my front door. Violation, unauthorized landscape feature. A week after that, second notice. Fines, $100 per day. I replied with documents, scanned copies of my property survey, water flow diagrams, county codes. I even highlighted the part that listed the creek as a drainage corridor. I figured that would end it. Instead, they scheduled an inspection. That inspection was 3 strangers traipsing around my yard with phones and measuring tapes like they were investigating a murder. Karen stood just outside my fence, arms crossed like a judge at a dog show. They didn't step into the creek, but they pointed a lot. Took photos. Whispered. Then came the HOA meeting. I hadn't planned on going, but after getting another letter demanding I take immediate steps to mitigate the visual and ecological impact of the water structure, I figured it was time. Karen stood up in front of everyone like she was announcing a new park. We've identified a major safety risk on one of our newly absorbed properties, she said, pulling out a folder. An open, unfenced water feature that is breeding insects and presenting an erosion risk. She had a slideshow. Photos of my creek. Zoomed in to make the banks look jagged, the water look murky. She even claimed it was attracting wildlife that could pose a threat to neighborhood pets. I stood. Collected. I said, that's not a water feature. That's a state-recognized drainage easement. Your rules don't override geology. She smiled like she was about to sell me a timeshare. You're welcome to submit a request for variance, but in the meantime we'll need to proceed with one of 3 options. Fill in the waterway, fence it completely, or submit to weekly inspections. I laughed. Not loud, but enough that a few people turned. Then I said, "You can fence in your own ego, Karen. But this land? It's not yours to rewrite." People chuckled. Karen didn't. After that, things turned weird. My mailbox was found on the ground one morning, post snapped clean. Anonymous complaints started showing up: overgrowth, non-native species, unsafe slope angles. Someone dumped a pile of rocks into the shallow end of the creek. It backed up and flooded a bit. Then I saw her. Sitting in her SUV across the street, window cracked, camera lens sticking out like a paparazzi stakeout. She drove off when I walked toward her. I didn't fight. I kept my yard clean, trimmed the reeds, cleared the flow. But I also started collecting every notice, every photo, every petty move. Because I knew something Karen didn't. I wasn't just some grumpy old guy with a creek. I was the storm she hadn't planned for. I should have known it wouldn't stop with letters and snapshots. Because the thing about people like Karen, they don't quit when you ignore them. They escalate. It was a Wednesday just after dawn. The kind of morning where the air hangs heavy and the coffee hits different. I was on the back porch in slippers, mug in hand, watching fog drift over the creek like steam off a kettle. Peaceful. So. And then I heard it, a low, steady rumble. Not thunder. Not traffic. Heavier. Closer. I stood up just in time to see a small cement truck easing its way down the alley beside my fence, like it belonged there. A guy in a neon vest was walking backward, guiding the driver like they were docking a yacht. I set my mug down slowly. Walked fast. By the time I reached the edge of my yard, the truck was backing right up to the creek's upper bend, my creek's upper bend, and the man in the vest had positioned the chute over it. "Hey!" I yelled, waving both arms like a lunatic. "What the hell is this?" He looked at me like I was the crazy one. "Drainage mitigation, sir. Approved by your HO. Approved by?" I didn't even finish the sentence before the chute tilted and thick, gray concrete started to spill out like some kind of lava. Heavy. Wet. Final. I sprinted forward. Slipped in the wet grass. Landed hard on my side, ribs screaming. By the time I scrambled up again, mud caked and bleeding from the elbow, the creek was drowning. Concrete filled the channel like a death mask, smothering the stones, choking the reeds. I screamed. Demanded paperwork. Threatened to call the sheriff. The guy just shrugged. "Talk to the board," he said, nodding toward the clipboard in his hand. By the time they drove off, half the creek was entombed in concrete. The water gurgled uselessly under the thick crust, frogs nowhere in sight. Dragonflies gone. The air was quiet, not peaceful quiet. Just wrong. Karen stood across the street, arms folded, smug as a cat in a birdhouse. She gave me a little wave. And I smiled. Not because I'd lost, but because I knew what came next. The first storm hit that weekend. Not a big one, just enough to soak the lawn and flood the gutters. Normally the creek would drink it all up. Flow like it always did. Whisper through the rocks and disappear downstream. But there was no downstream anymore. There was only concrete. So the water backed up. Slow at first, like it didn't quite believe it had nowhere to go. Then it started to spread. Pooled in the yard. Lapped over the edge of the patio. By noon, the sidewalk out front was ankle deep. Across the way, Karen stood under a beach-sized umbrella, watching like a satisfied villain. She even waved again. But by the second storm, things got worse. Mrs. Delaney's basement flooded. Mr. Alvarez's retaining wall started to lean. The Jensens had to dig a trench to keep water from pouring through their sliding doors. And each time the HOA sent out fresh letters, blaming homeowners. Improper grading. Poor maintenance. Blocked personal drains. Not once did they mention the concrete tomb they poured into the natural drainage system. Not once. So I stayed quiet. Went to the meetings. Nodded when Karen pointed at red circles on printed-out satellite maps. They passed new, emergency protocols, including mandatory property drainage inspections, $250 a pop. I smiled politely and paid nothing. But every storm I walked the neighborhood with my old Nikon. Photos of puddles, flooded flower beds, yards that looked like rice paddies. I flew my drone, aerial views of the water patterns, the pooling. I mapped it all. Because what they'd done wasn't just petty. It wasn't just stupid. It was illegal. And I had time. The neighborhood changed. Fast. People used to smile when they passed each other walking dogs. Now they crossed the street. The Hendersons accused the Peters of building a flower bed that redirected runoff. Someone blamed the Alvarez kids for clogging a storm drain with soccer balls. I heard someone mutter that Karen should start finding the clouds. The HOA doubled down. Karen formed a new flood mitigation task force, and surprise appointed herself chair. The task force mostly handed out more fines, wrote longer letters, sent out glossy flyers about community responsibility. Meanwhile, the actual drainage systems buckled. The storm drains overflowed during every rainfall. Lawns rotted. Mold climbed up vinyl siding. Sidewalks cracked like puzzle pieces. And yet, I said nothing. Not yet. Because something deeper was shifting. Not just the mood. Not just the lawns. The land. I started noticing odd tilts in driveways. Small sinkholes near fence posts. Puddles that didn't evaporate even under full sun. It was as if the earth itself was remembering something they'd tried to bury. Water, after all, doesn't forget. It waits. And when it returns, it brings friends. One afternoon, Karen knocked on my door again. She had a fresh violation notice and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Due to ongoing drainage issues, we need you to submit a full landscaping proposal by the 30th. I leaned against the doorframe. Should I include the illegal concrete structure you poured into my easement? She blinked. Any alterations to existing drainage systems may incur additional review. I took the notice, thanked her with a grin, and closed the door. Then I added it to the binder. The one with photos, maps, correspondence, drone data. And at the very back, a sealed envelope my grandfather gave me when he signed over the property. Use this if they ever try anything stupid, he'd said. I had never opened it. But now, it was almost time. The rains didn't stop. Week after week, sky turned the same shade of steel, and Alder Bend turned into a giant sponge. Grass squelched. Driveways shimmered with standing water. The air smelled like mildew and wet cement. By the third storm, Mrs. Jensen had black mold creeping up her basement wall. Mr. Alvarez's porch slanted like a sinking barge. Even the squeaky clean show homes started to crack. Hairlines in the stucco, warped floorboards, doors that refused to close. And through it all, Karen stood firm, in every sense of the word. Emergency HOA meetings were called weekly now. She'd arrive with a stack of printouts and a coffee cup that said "World's Best Leader." Slide after slide of satellite photos, red circles, bullet points, fake solutions. This is why we need stricter inspections, she'd say. Or, residents must be held accountable. Never once, maybe we shouldn't have poured 900 pounds of concrete into a natural watershed. Meanwhile, I played dumb. Took my seat. Took my notes. Smiled when spoken to. But behind closed doors, I was building my case. I digitized my photos. Organized them by date, storm, impact zone. I color-coded my drone videos. Mapped every blocked flow, every pool, every sign the land was failing to breathe. And when I was done, I opened the envelope. Inside were documents older than most roofs in Alder Bend. Surveyor's maps. County Water Authority letters. State-level environmental designations. The creek wasn't just some ditch I liked to fish beside. It was a protected natural drainage channel. One that no HOA had any right to touch, let alone fill with concrete. Karen hadn't just crossed a line. She'd driven a cement truck through it. But I wasn't ready to strike just yet. It had to be undeniable. It had to be visual. It had to hurt. And it was getting there. The fourth week of rain was biblical. They called it a 100-year storm. Cold fronts, low pressure, oversaturation. A perfect storm cocktail. Alder Bend drowned. The streets turned to rivers. Mailboxes vanished under brown foam. Mulch floated like confetti. Gutters screamed as they tore free from siding. I watched from my porch as neighbors waded through knee-deep water, flip-flops lost somewhere beneath the surface. The smell was swamp, sewer, and rot. Across the street, Karen was up to her shins in runoff, yelling into her phone with her other hand clamped over her head like that would stop the sky. Her yard, once the poster child for HOA perfection, was underwater. Her prized rose bushes gone. Her porch light flickered like a dying star. And still she tried to fight it. More fines. More drainage awareness pamphlets. More blaming. She even posted on the neighborhood board accusing the city of sabotage. But it wasn't the city. It was her. And the walls were closing in. I made 2 calls. One to the County Water Authority, formal request for an investigation into unauthorized environmental alteration. The other to the local environmental office, wetland violation report complete with photos. I used my name, my address. Left the HOA out of it for now. Let them do the digging. Then I got to work on phase 2. A burner email. A simple message. Anonymous. Blunt. Included drone shots, violation notices, timestamps, the works. I sent it to every local news station. Every community Facebook group. Even the HOA gossip page, the one Karen banned me from last year. And then I waited. Didn't take long. 3 days later, 2 white trucks rolled down Alder Loop Drive. One bore the county seal. The other, city inspections. Out stepped 2 men in muddy boots and grim expressions. I invited them in. Offered coffee. Laid out the evidence like a royal flush. They didn't say much. Just nodded. Took notes. Then they spent hours in the yard, measuring, sampling, photographing. By the time they left, their clipboards were heavy. That night, the news broke. A short segment: illegal HOA modifications may have worsened flooding in Alder Bend. The footage showed aerial shots of our drowned suburb. The narrator spoke in grave tones. Words like liability, unauthorized, possible civil consequences. Karen wasn't named. But her days were numbered. She knew the second it aired. The next emergency board meeting was chaos. I showed up early, sat in the back, arms folded. Karen stormed in, hair frizzed, raincoat dripping, and clutching a massive folder like a shield. She slammed it on the table and launched into a rant. Slander. False accusations. Conspiracies. Attacks on our community. The board looked shell-shocked. Then the projector screen lit up. Photos pulled directly from my whistleblower packet. Concrete pouring into a natural stream. Maps showing protected easements. County code violations in screaming red text. Silence fell like a dropped piano. Karen blustered. Tried to say it was all a misunderstanding, temporary erosion control. That she had verbal permission. When someone asked for written proof, she froze. There wasn't any. Because she made it all up. And finally the board saw it. They didn't say a word. They didn't have to. The storm was here. And it had a name. The fallout was immediate. By the next morning, red notices started appearing like warning flags nailed to front doors. Notice of investigation. Unsafe structure. Occupancy review pending. 12 houses, including Karen's, were marked for foundation instability. The streets turned quiet. Not peaceful quiet, courtroom quiet. You could feel it in the air like static before a lightning strike. No one made eye contact at the mailbox. No one waved anymore. Even the gossip Facebook group went dark. I kept my head down. Just another old guy tending his yard. But I knew it was coming. I could hear it in the creak of porch steps and the way the walls of Alder Bend moaned during each rainfall. The next storm brought the breaking point. It came in fast, wind bending trees, rain thudding on rooftops like fists. That night, I sat on my porch with a thermos of black coffee and watched as the ground gave way. One house on Hemlock Court cracked clean down the center. The porch collapsed like a folding chair. The driveway shifted, slanted hard like it wanted to leave. Karen's house didn't collapse. It sunk. The soil beneath the foundation gave out inch by inch until the columns leaned forward like they were bowing to the mess she made. Water climbed her steps. The porch light blinked once. Then darkness. She screamed. Not a little shout. A long, guttural, helpless noise that echoed down the street. By morning her lawn looked like a crater. And her once perfect home had been declared unfit for residence. She packed up the next day. Not all the way, just enough. Enough to move into a borrowed RV that someone parked on the edge of the neighborhood. The wheels already sinking into the mud. Meanwhile, the city kept coming. Inspections. Samples. Photos. The news covered it again. This time longer. Interviews with homeowners. Drone footage. Environmental activists with clipboards and concerned eyebrows. Phrases like gross negligence and civil penalties got airtime. Lawsuits began to swirl. First whispers, then threats, then filings. Neighbors who once bragged about community pride were now calling lawyers. One guy even tried to sell his house online, as is, flood damage minor, motivated seller. No takers. Then came the insurance denials. Company after company reviewed the claims and said the same thing. Negligence voids coverage. No payout. No repairs. Some folks tried to fight it. Most just got quiet. And in the middle of it all, Karen tried to rally. She hosted a town hall in the gutted community center. Half the chairs were empty. Those who showed up mostly stared at their shoes. Karen stood at the front with the same clipboard and the same tired smile. We're under attack, she said. From outsiders. From traitors. From people who want to see our community fail. No one clapped. No one stood. She tried again. We need to stick together. Rebuild. Show them we're strong. Someone coughed. Then Mrs. Jensen, the quiet widow from the corner house, stood up. She held up a photo. A simple one, her basement carpet floating in brown water. "I don't care about speeches," she said. "I want my house back." And just like that, it broke. Voices rose. Questions were shouted. Karen couldn't answer them. She tried. But her voice cracked, and so did the room. That night, the board voted to suspend all HOA operations. No new fines. No new policies. Just silence. But I wasn't finished. Because while everyone else argued over insurance and damage control, I was still building. I filed a final report with the state. Attached everything: the county documents, the drone footage, the violation records. I even included a copy of the HOA's own bylaws, where they'd failed their duty to protect shared infrastructure. And then I got a knock at my door. This time it wasn't Karen. It was a city marshal. He handed me a form, sealed and stamped. I opened it slowly. It was official. The HOA was under state investigation. The charges were real. Environmental code violations. Tampering with protected land. Endangering residential structures through unauthorized development. I smiled, thanked the marshal, closed the door, and sat back down beside my creek. Well, what was left of it? For now. Because I had one more plan left. And it was almost time. The first city citations hit like thunder. Thick envelopes. Bold red stamps. Legal language sharp as a knife. Every HOA board member got one. So did Karen. And then came the red tags. Bright orange notices slapped on doors. Unsafe structure. Occupancy restricted. Immediate action required. Karen's house was one of the first. She tried to pretend it was a mistake. Marched into City Hall with her clipboard and fake pearls. Came back pale, tight-lipped, and quiet for the first time in months. Then the insurance companies pulled out. Negligence, they said. No payout. Homes unsellable. Mortgages drowning. Families packed up and left with whatever they could carry. Karen tried to sue the city. The judge threw it out. Tried to blame flood mismanagement. The press laughed. Tried to organize a Save the HOA rally. Nobody showed up. One rainy Tuesday, I watched from my porch as she loaded cardboard boxes into a rusted truck. She looked smaller than usual. No clipboard. No fake smile. Her house, cracked, tilted, half-sunken, was declared condemned 2 days later. At the emergency HOA meeting, the 5 remaining residents raised their hands. Motion: dissolve the HOA. Proved. Karen said nothing. Just stood there while a city marshal watched her shred documents into a bin that overflowed halfway through. And that was it. The HOA was dead. And nature? Nature came back. The creek flowed again. We dug out the concrete by hand. Volunteers came. Kids planted trees. The land healed faster than anyone thought it would. The frogs returned. The dragonflies danced. And one morning, I carved a small sign and planted it where the water first curled through my yard. Nature always wins. And that's how a woman with a clipboard lost to a stream. Thanks for watching. Like if this story made you cheer. Subscribe for more wild HOA tales. New stories every day. Drop your city in the comments. We love seeing where you're watching from.